Alrighty, welcome back to the Big Show, Maya Palacio. I am Jamel Hartman. It's the Daily Hour brought to you by the BAC Group of Companies, Medical Wells, Lindos, and People's Pharmacy. Please do not forget to subscribe on our website. Follow us on all of our social media channels to stay up to date with all that we have going on. Help us grow beyond the mic as we do our part to continue to improve our community. I want to share something real quickly before I bring Her Excellency in. So yesterday I was emailed by someone from her office to just confirm everything. And the person wrote, he will da 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 da. So I'm like, you mean she, right? Not he. Said, no, I meant he, as in Her Excellency. I was like, oh my goodness, Jamal, that was one of those moments, boy. I said, I didn't know the acronym at the time. You know, I'm thinking like gender. And I was like, that was one of those moments you just showed what bus you rode on, boy.
Hey, well, you learn something new every day.
But anyway, audience, give a warm TDH welcome to Her Excellency, the Governor of Bermuda, Rena Lalgie. Morning, Governor. How are you?
Morning. I'm well. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming. You didn't judge me just now, did you?
No, actually, I was thinking that not knowing the acronym HE is not really a big issue. And you would be surprised just how long it took for people to stop writing letters to His Excellency. So I lots of things actually that I'd receive, which would be, "Dear His Excellency," the kind of thing. So look, you are not alone. That's hardly the best.
This is why we appreciate you making me feel better.
I think that also goes to speak about just like how that acronym has been in place for long, because it's always been men as well. So it's never been like a confusion, at least in Bermuda. And now that you're the first woman, it's just like now people kind of notice it a little bit more and realize that it might mean something else that they thought it did.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's true, because had it been a man governor, I wouldn't have asked, right? So yeah. All right, well, first off, thanks once again for doing this. We appreciate you. You know, it's been a while. You graced us with your presence when you first started on the job, which was crazy time in itself. But can you do us a favor? Because I still think today many of my fellow Bermudians don't even really understand the role of the position itself. Just explain the role of the governor in Bermuda.
So the role of the governor in Bermuda is set out in the Constitution, which is the 1968 Constitution for Bermuda, and it specifies some powers and responsibilities that sit with the governor. So that includes defence, internal security, policing, and external affairs. And there are a number of really specific responsibilities that flow from that, like making appointments, being responsible for the conduct of some of the people that are appointed by the governor. And so there are some very explicit responsibilities that are all set out in the Constitution. And then I often think that there is something in the spirit of the Constitution, which sets out quite an important role for the governor of Bermuda, and that the kind of key takeaways for me there are around good governance. Mm-hmm. And the separation of power, which in most kind of democracies happens in lots of different ways. The way in which it works in the UK, the US, other overseas territories, vastly different. But there is that kind of principle that not all power responsibility authorities are kind of in one office or one individual is a really important principle within a kind of democracy. And so that's, I think, very much in the spirit, and is probably in the area that people have raised questions most. But there is lots that in Bermuda, as one of them, Bermuda is often described as one of the most self-governing of the overseas territories, and that is because there are so many delegations, even in those areas, mm-hmm. which where over time responsibilities have been delegated to the elected government and specific ministers in some instances. So policing is the obvious one that stands out.
Indeed, and thank you for that. Thank you, and I hope that answers a lot of questions right there. Very in depth, but concise. And if you have any questions or comments for the governor, please send them through. We'll get through as many as possible. I mentioned when you first came in, pretty much you landed almost in a pandemic. Mm-hmm.
Quite literally.
Yeah, it was.
Since COVID, I always say to people, that's when I got here.
Yeah, right. And I think even going through that, people didn't necessarily understand the role of the office. But in terms of, it's not just you. And we have to humanize you, right? Because people just see people as their title. You have a family, right? What was that experience like, not just as the governor in the position as the representative of the UK, but even for your family making this big change, coming to this island, and it's a pandemic. Like you can't, it was something that experienced every few generations.
So, I mean, I think it's like everything there. I can definitely look back and see some silver linings within it. But I picked up my family and moved them out here to Bermuda with two. My children were 7 and 10 when we arrived on the island, and so actually, in some ways, I think there was a bit that was a bit easier because we had not spent much time with family for the best part of the year in 2020. They had not been at school, and so sort of being kind of separated from their community, which we were really, really embedded within, was a lot easier in that sense. But this was a hard job to come to do and to arrive to do in the middle of a pandemic, because so much around the sort of the role and the way in which the governor has traditionally interacted with the community and supported the community in Bermuda is around the convening power, and that has just wasn't possible, and actually wasn't possible for a considerable period of time. I think it also changed, and this is one thing that people have often reflected to me, it changed the nature of my arrival as well. And so I was got there, and again, I can definitely see the silver lining in that. But as the governor, I was sworn in with 3-4 people in the room. My mother, my husband, my 2 children, on this really momentous day for me as an individual, but also more widely, were upstairs, not able to be in the room to kind of witness me being sworn in as the governor of Bermuda. And so it does, in that sense, I think it was quite different. It does mean that I was sworn in outside of the ceremonial uniform, which is definitely something that probably I look back on and I'm grateful for not having sort of on day one, morning one, to step in and out in the uniform.
So thinking about just your time here in Bermuda, what have you actually enjoyed most about your position on the island?
So I've really enjoyed being able to meet with people across the community and to try and get some insight into kind of what they would like the governor to be doing, what they'd like me as the governor to be doing. And therefore, I've had a really good opportunity to be able to think about how sort of putting the sort of legislative work to one side, putting the kind of executive functions to one side, to really be able to think about some of the communities who would kind of welcome the support of the governor, but also welcome the support from me as governor as well. And so in that sense, I have most enjoyed some of the opportunities to be able to think about how we open up Government House as a space to be utilised by people who are sort of are wanting to either hold events, to be able to have a platform, because the convening power of the governor, both within Bermuda and more widely, is really not to be understated. But so much of it is rooted, as I say, in terms of gatherings. So things around being able to have sporting events on Government House grounds, to be able to bring some of the communities who have not really engaged with each other together, and to be able to think about that. And so I've done some of that around the music community as well on the island, and brought some of the different groups together to think about how they might be able to work more together, and also hosted lots of events on the grounds.
Indeed.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that there was sports being played on the grounds.
So I think one of the favourites, we've had charity events in terms of closest to the pins on the North Shore lawn. The Fat Tire Massive came up and did one of their just kind of races on the grounds, which was absolutely brilliant. I mean, we had hundreds of people from kind of kids on their kind of balance bikes, right the way through to kind of Commonwealth Games athletes who did the tour around. And to be honest, I thought that would be a bit of a novelty for people, that it was just going to be for because we know Bermuda has a really, really kind of active cycling community. And I thought that was going to be an absolute novelty for them, that it was just an opportunity to come up to Government House. And instead, seeing people going, actually, this is quite tough. I hadn't realised how hilly it was. Like, this is a tough course. And so over the next month, we've got, particularly given the work that's going on at the Arboretum, there are going to be some cross-country events that happen up on the grounds of Government Houses as well. Obviously, I can't use the building, but the grounds, we can still think about how we utilise that.
See, I was going to stay away from the building thing, but real quickly, just jumping in real quickly. I remember when I was young, they used to have like equestrian events on the North Shore side up there. I don't know how long ago was that, but audience, I don't want to date myself, but we used to do that.
So they're absolutely, and the equestrian is kind of a touchy subject in the equestrian community, because they've been kind of mentioning it, had reached out, and I'd said, yeah, let's make it happen, and let's do it. And then I think sort of many of the other sporting communities have made it up. Other than the kind of Queen's Baton Relay event, we actually haven't had that group up at all back at Government House, but they are most welcome still. And but yeah, I think that it's traditionally there were lots of events that would be held on the grounds. They're still utilised a lot by the kind of gardening community as well, and a real opportunity to be able to think about how we can do that more. We've had kind of multi-faith events up there, which has allowed a number of different faith communities to be able to come together and worship on the grounds as well. It's been absolutely brilliant. And things like the eco clubs, working with the Bermuda National Trust and some of the events. So there's an eco club that happens up at Government House now. Sort of, it was every 2 weeks. It now is, I think, currently weekly, and they are utilising the Slat House there, doing amazing work. And there's a really diverse group of young people who are coming up every week, working with the BNT up there.
I feel like I've been living under a rock.
Yeah, I didn't know that the grounds are being used for so many things.
It's been, look, I mean, I think there is so much that happens here in Bermuda. And you asked me about the pandemic. I think one of the really tough things around that was it really changed and restricted, like it did in all sorts of walks of life, changed and restricted what we could do. And many of the things that we did traditionally have not been possible anymore. But it really, spending probably, I think, maybe I would say the first 18 months or so of my tenure was affected by kind of COVID in terms of what was possible in different ways. And then, being able to having such a long period where we couldn't utilize the kind of venue, but the kind of Government House as a building itself to be able to convene has made it tough. But hopefully that has given us an opportunity to really think about the things we want to continue to do, and things that we might be some of the opportunities to innovate as well.
Indeed.
Nice. Well, I know you just talked about all of those amazing things that are happening on the grounds, but can you give us an example of maybe a standout accomplishment for yourself in this role?
So, look, there are definitely days where it kind of my objective and my kind of sense of achievement comes from survival. But when I look back over the period of time in its entirety, I think finding there is really something that is quite important in the job, which is about ensuring that the Constitution is upheld. And so some of the kind of serious pieces around the job, which are never particularly nice, but thinking about ensuring that the kind of governor's role in ensuring and raising issues around integrity in public office, and also around accountability in public office, has been something I feel particularly proud of. I'm not sure what sort of, what history will say about it, or what Bermudians will say, what the stories that will be told about that going forward. But I'm particularly proud of that, because it is not the nice part of the job, but it is absolutely essential. And it is, that is certainly something. I think actually the conversation we're having is quite interesting to me. I think it's really struck me in my time that there is not as much understanding around the role of the governor, given the importance that it plays within the kind of system of governance on the island. It's really quite surprising to me, and I think for various reasons, people have raised more questions about the role of the governor, whether that is the kind of what Bermuda wants going forward, but also raised questions about kind of how someone becomes the governor. Whilst in some instances, undoubtedly, that's kind of rooted, the driver for those questions is not necessarily a positive thing. As someone who believes in open democracies, who wants people to be engaged in how their society and their political systems work, it is a really important thing for me, actually, to have been able to just shine a light a bit more on the extent to which the governor plays a role through the constitution in Bermuda at the moment, and to dispel some of those myths about the fact that the governor is purely ceremonial.
I did see a comment in the questions there, but there's a question for you asking, like, after the new governor is sworn in, like, what's going to be next for you? What are your next goals?
So I'm heading home, and so I'm looking forward to being back in the UK and being back in London, closer to family and friends for a while. That feels really important after what feels like the best part of kind of 5 years, once you add kind of COVID before we came out. And so I'm looking forward to kind of thinking about and preparing for what lies ahead. And I know that I'll take a lot of Bermuda with me as I go forward.
When is your final day? Like when is your term actually up?
I haven't booked my flight yet.
Oh, okay. She's staying, folks.
I haven't booked my flight yet, but I'm really conscious that I need to get on with that, because if not, I'll end up on some really convoluted route through the United States. 2 stops en route between here and London.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. Very fun question, and I think you should give it to us. I want to see if you can give it to us. She's asking, have you been able to speak, like, learn a Bermudian accent? She wants to hear you speak like a Bermudian.
Most definitely not. I am not going to disrespect Bermuda in this way at this stage by attempting to speak with a Bermudian accent. But I'm confident I can understand, though, and that, I think, is definitely a step forward.
Yeah. Charles Jeffers says, Her Excellency has been the most engaging governor in my lifetime. Wish you and your family all the best and hope that you will remain connected to Bermuda. In saying that, your children are, they're 5 years older, so probably like 14 and 11 now. That's an interesting age to spend in a different culture. How do they feel about leaving?
So I think they are excited about a sort of life afterwards. There are lots of opportunities that come from being the daughters of the children of the governor, but I think they are definitely looking forward to the kind of freedom that will come afterwards. So I think that as well is probably something from them, but they are looking forward to being back in. Well, they're back in the UK already, but being able to, when they come home, to have the kind of the spread of the diversity of kind of food that they can eat in a city like London, the shops that they can go to, and also we are a family who really enjoy the arts and culture, and being able to, that has been a great part of being in Bermuda, because for such a small place, there is so much on offer and so many options to engage with the sporting communities, but also with the arts as well. But London is London, so they are, and I am of course biased on this point, but they are looking forward to being back in the inner cities.
All righty. I've got a question from Samurai Sky. He's asking, why did the governor not sign off on the marijuana legislation put forward by the government? I've heard mixed stories on the topic. Also, what must happen beforehand / I guess referendum for the governor to sign off on any new legislation going forward?
Okay. So really, really important question. I think this was one of those moments that I was alluding to earlier. in terms of, I think that was a moment in time where people sort of stopped and went, hold on, sorry, the governor does what and can, and why is that? And that's really sparked a debate, which I thought was a healthy thing to have in a democratic society such as Bermuda. So the decision that I made as governor was about whether to assent to the legislation, and the Constitution guides me through that process in each instance. Options being to assent, to withhold assent, or to refer it to Her Majesty. The Constitution says. So those are the three options, and I decided that, acting in my own discretion, which is what the Constitution calls on the governor to do in these instances and in others, to refer it, because it was not, on my understanding of it, my reading of the draft legislation, it was not in keeping with the international obligations that sit on Bermuda and the UK, and so referred it through to the UK for Her Majesty, as was then Her Majesty's signification through the Secretary of State. And it was that decision that came back with an instruction for me. There are really narrow instances in Bermuda's constitution where the governor is instructed by a minister or secretary of state in the UK, and this is one of them. And it was because in instances where international obligations are a question, that's one, and there are also some specified other areas in which legislation, for the most part, I sign an assent to legislation that comes through and across my desk after it's been through the House of Assembly and the Senate. And in most instances, it doesn't really call on the governor to make a decision, because it is out with the responsibilities of the governor, and so in that instance the signification is quite ceremonial, I suppose, in the system, but it was engaged because of the international obligations, and that was the reason for the decision. It wasn't because of my personal views, my political views. It wasn't because I wanted to pick a fight. It was genuinely based on my interpretation of the international obligations and whether that would contravene it. That was why I made the decision, and it was a conversation that we'd been having for quite some time leading up to the draft bill making its way through to me.
Okay. It's interesting because I actually forgot you had overseen that. And I appreciate that question, because I honestly didn't understand it at the time either. And it helped me understand a bit more of, it's not about the personal feelings or the political position. And I think that was the part that the majority of the public had to understand. Suzanne Ingham says you're the first governor that interacts online with people Facebook, which is like, maybe I don't interact on. You on Facebook like that?
I don't have a Facebook account. I never have done. We do have a Government House Facebook account, but this is, I have to say, social, and we do try to put out as much as we can through that platform to give people a sense of what is happening. I think this is probably one of the things that is definitely, for me personally, and also for the office, a work in progress in terms of being able to use social media to kind of shine a light on some of the activities a bit more. It's not something I'm particularly good at or kind of inclined towards, but I do like watching what other people are doing on online and being able to get a sense of the views on particular issues. So in that sense, I've stepped into the social media frame so that I can see what people are thinking and feeling about a whole range of subjects. But I'm really poor at kind of posting things out.
We understand. Charles H. Jeffs II. You kind of didn't allude to this earlier, but kind of Bermudians about the position of governor and how they feel about it and the like. But independence is a big topic in Bermuda. It's been one. It doesn't seem like the majority of the Bermudians want it. But do you have any thoughts on it?
My thought is that it's not for me. as Rena or as governor, I think that's really a question for the people of Bermuda. And so that, a decision around what the constitutional relationship with the UK should be, I think, is for Bermudians. And equally, I think the questions around Bermuda's constitution and reforming it, which I think often we end up in, anytime anybody mentions constitutional reform, people hear independence, but there is a kind of a realm of constitutional reform which might not change fundamentally the constitutional relationship between the UK and Bermuda. So I don't have a view to express other than to say that it really is a matter for the people of Bermuda, and that has been something that has been the successive UK governments of both political parties have very much been in a place for decades now, which says it is for the people of each territory to make that decision and to determine what relationship they have and what the future looks like. So the bit that I find most difficult is that sort of narrative that almost says the kind of either the UK, which is inherited partly in that question actually, but that the UK is either trying to kind of push inhabited territories towards independence, or is somehow trying to kind of hold on against the will of the people, and it just couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, Maya, you got questions? I see you.
Oh yeah, so going back a little bit more to the earlier question and about the marijuana legislation, someone actually did pose just a little bit more clarity. What does the international obligations mean?
So there are UN conventions which are in place, which the UK and by extension Bermuda are subject to, which talks about the circumstances in which cannabis can be legal, and most of those are for around sort of medical purposes and for research purposes as well. Sort of legalization for sort of recreational use, for sort of general use, goes beyond the constraints of the UN obligations. I think the bit that is worth separating is decriminalisation, which is a process that many other jurisdictions have already been through, and actually Bermuda has as well, which is not suggesting, as has been in the past in Bermuda and has been and was in the past in the UK as well, sort of possession of small quantities for personal use is not something that sort of that goes through the kind of criminal justice system in that way. And those changes were made prior to my arrival, and many other territories are still trying to go through that process that Bermuda has already been through. But I don't have the legislation in front of me right now. But to be able to kind of quote, if that was a question where I was supposed to kind of quote the specific paragraphs from within, then I won't attempt to do that.
Alrighty.
Well, thank you for that, though. So Charles H. Jeffords is asking, do you think we will ever see a Bermudian governor appointed by the UK government?
So it's an interesting question, and actually the appointment processes, I think, really should consider sort of what people's ability to be able to do the job. And I always find it quite interesting that, of course, Bermudians are British nationals, and so I think it is not something that I would say I can't see. I could definitely see it happening, assuming within that, I don't know how long we will continue to have the current arrangement that we have in place, but it is something that I think is in theory possible. I think the important question will be, as it always is the extent to which someone can kind of separate themselves and make some of the decisions that can be made, and that's a question that isn't determined by kind of where you were born or sort of how you come to be British.
Alrighty. One last question from the audience. Charles H. Jeffs II, he was just asking, while Her Majesty has in the past apologized for slavery, do you think the UK government would even ever consider reparations for the descendants of enslaved people in overseas territories?
So first of all, is Charles got a sort of direct line here? Is this the sort of like, what is this? Like, I'm sorry, Charles, we can talk. Look, a really important topic, and one which is very much playing out as a debate across the Commonwealth, literally as we speak, as heads of governments are gathered in Samoa. And so I was certainly sat on the sofa last night with trying to get the kids to come in to be able to listen to some of the coverage around this discussion, because I think it's been going on for some time. And at the moment, the discussions that are happening at CHOGM, as these meetings are referred to, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has made comments precisely on reparatory justice, and the extent to which his position at the moment as the government is that there is a kind of openness to discussing non-financial options around that. And so I think this is a debate that's going to continue. It's at the heart of some of the discussions that happen within the Commonwealth as part of the kind of impact of climate change, of global financial systems. This debate is really going to continue. But it's quite healthy that we are having the discussion. But the reality is that His Majesty the King made a point which kind of sounds quite like stating the obvious, but the history is something we cannot change.
Okay, I know you go, but this audience is engaging. They like you if they're asking questions.
But I feel like I lowered the tone because I was listening to the discussion earlier, and now we've ended up with this doesn't feel so much like Fun Friday anymore.
Right? It's changed, and I didn't even get to ask you what's the craziest thing you've asked somebody to bring you from the UK to Bermuda, right? You got to share that with us before we go. So I'm gonna give you time to think.
Okay, so definitely my instinct was food, and so particularly some of those. I suppose for me, it's some of the creature comforts. I like being able to have access to chocolate from the UK, Europe more widely, because I'm not so sure about the kind of American recipes, even for the brands that exist on both sides of the Atlantic. But probably the one that really, when you were having this discussion earlier, that stuck with me was, I will, if I've got family coming over, I will often kind of order some hair products or something to their house to bring over when with friends or family are coming over. And I remember it was probably a year or two ago watching a court case and reading about a court case with someone who was charged and convicted with importing drugs, and the message had been that that she'd drawn suspicion because she was carrying sort of hair products and cosmetics in her luggage, which are widely available on island, and why would anyone do that? And I remember sort of looking at this kind of going, so maybe I'm not alone.
Wow, that is funny. I want to share something because it's kind of fun. So on the left, it's a picture of me tagging the governor in 1980 something, and on the right, it's the picture you took with my niece up at the National Sports Center a couple of years ago. And to this day, that picture made her day. She's now 11, but we speak about you being engaged and out in the public, and we haven't really touched on this during this conversation, but I remember when Barack Obama became the president of the United States, I heard a journalist say that this is the first time that little Black boys and Black people in particular can actually see someone in a position like this and believe that they too can be in that position. Regardless of what people feel about the position, you are the first woman and the first Black person to actually fill that position. What do you think that, how do you feel? Do you even feel like it's a role where you feel like you have to use it to inspire others to actually aspire that you too can do this? Like, what are your thoughts on the responsibility of that?
So I feel the responsibility, and it's not it's not why I came or why I applied. But I do feel the responsibility, and to me, it is important to be able to contribute to this sense that there isn't a space where we can't be, where you feel like you can't, whatever it is that makes you whether it's an actual minority or from a kind of where it wasn't written, nobody assumes that this would be the kind of thing that you do, that there isn't I want people to believe that there isn't a room they can't occupy, there isn't an office they can't occupy, or a position they can't occupy by virtue of their gender, their sex, by virtue of their kind of race or ethnic background. And so I felt through the time the responsibility to be able not just to do that and to engage with people and to be able to have more personal discussions about what that means, but also I just, every time someone said at the start that I was the first, the immediate thing that went through my mind was, I just don't want to be the last. Like, I don't want to be the reason that people use to say that someone like me couldn't occupy this office going forward, because so much of it has been gendered, so much of the role of the governor, so much of the way in which people interact with the governor, the way in people interact with the governor's spouse has been gendered, and I think that's tough. And I think there's a conversation in Bermuda around gender, not just in terms of safety and freedom from violence, but also around where the kind of opportunities exist. And I just didn't want to kind of come be the first and then be the explanation that everyone uses to say, well, that's precisely why you can't have a woman in that office, or that's precisely why you can't have a Black person who occupies the office of governor, not in Bermuda anyway.
Yeah, and that leads to this last question from the audience. Linguistics translation says, all this, whatever. What of your legacy would you pass on to the incoming governor?
So I will share some of the kind of benefit of my experience, and I will hand over. Whenever you leave an office like this, there is work that is undone, and so I will do everything I can to aid a smooth transition. But I also think there is something of an opportunity when you do have a change in governor or in others, not to have someone who then doesn't come in with any kind of preconceptions around it. So there are definitely some things that I will hold my counsel on, but for the most part, I will be doing everything I can to ensure a smooth transition and to ensure that some of the important work that I will have started but not finish is able to continue.
Okay. Final message to the people of Bermuda.
I am grateful for the welcome that I have received, and support that I have received as well, and for the opportunity to serve. And that is not actually the sort of I would have served as the governor because the late Queen Elizabeth II appointed me to, but that would not have necessarily allowed me to serve the people unless there was consent and an invitation to be able to serve. And those are the days that I've been most happy, the moments where I've and sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing you're called upon to do, but where I have had the opportunity to truly serve the people of Bermuda, that is something that I will be eternally grateful for.
Indeed. Governor Lalgie, thank you so much for providing us the opportunity to have this conversation with you on this platform. Thank you for the work. A pandemic. We didn't even mention you became one of the most popular governors in the history of Bermuda because you gave the people a holiday. Yeah, they love holidays. They love holidays when you gave them. Comments on Twitter. Don't worry.
Well, thank you for having me back as well, and also for pronouncing my name correctly.
Oh, I got it this time. Trust me. I've been going and pronouncing it. So yeah, it took me a work. I told you I wasn't on the same bus as everyone else. But thank you.
No, I think you were. now you're in a minority.
I appreciate your humor. Thank you. So have a wonderful time.
Bye.
See you soon. Talk soon.
Bye.
All right, Governor Lalgie, thank you so much, folks. If you appreciated that conversation, please give us a thumbs up, a love, a like. Make sure you share it with your friends, your family, your colleagues. Don't go anywhere. We've got the Daily Play coming up, and also, we're gonna do the hashtag giveaway thing to add another name in there to see who can compete. We'll give our final thoughts after that as well. So stick with us. We'll be back in about a minute 15 seconds, I think. Yeah.